Okay, so immigration is really low on my list of things that I prioritize, and by low, I mean really, really low. It's simply not something that I care much about, and that's why you rarely see me discuss it. But because it's a hot topic, and people keep asking me about it, I'll do a video on immigration. So if you motherfuckers ask me one more time about my positions on immigrations, I swear to God. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm just fishing for views, as I'm not passionate about this subject, but I'll play along. First of all, let's start with the libertarian position, more specifically the anarcho-capitalist position. Many people wrongfully say that we adopt an open borders position, and that's simply false. Now that doesn't mean that we adopt a closed border position either. These ridiculously stupid false dichotomies need to stop. Now generally speaking, these borders are referring to lines that separate nations and states. And because the state is a criminal organization, people often say that these lines are just imaginary lines. No, the lines are there and they are enforced. You just feel as if they're illegitimate, and rightfully so. But if these borders are said to be illegitimate, then the open borders position is not a libertarian position, as no such border should exist for them to open or close. Functionally speaking, open borders just means that the state monopolizes the territory and then they ensure that people travel freely between the states. Now, it's not their right to make said decision in the first place, and by monopolizing it, they prevent complete and absolute rightful privatization. So, be it open or closed, the government is still using your taxpayer dollar to pay for the policy. And so as long as they're doing that, there will always be injustices on any sides of this. If there was an anarcho-capitalist model, all land would be privatized, or at the very least, it could be homestead if it has no previous owner. Therefore, your ability to move around will be entirely dependent on the property owner. Yes, for things like roads, this policy may be rather loose, but it'd still be for them to decide because they own the road. This is why no such right to travel or migrate actually exists, because your ability to do so is entirely dependent on the property owners between where you're at and your destination, unless you're dropping in via parachute or you're teleporting. And you certainly cannot drive through or walk through somebody's property just because it's a convenient route, unless the property owner allowed you to do so. Now, some people would say, well, Eric, you're just describing the open borders position. Bro, open borders is a position adopted by a multitude of different ideologies, and they don't even agree on the term. If you ask an ANCAP that claims his position is open borders, he may describe what I just did. If you ask a minarchist, he'll say that there should still be some sort of border control and vetting process for those that may be trying to enter in, because some may actually want to do harm. There may be terrorists, deadly diseases, and so forth. This is all done by the state, of course. And the modern Democrat has a similar position, only they don't actually mind funding the migration efforts with your taxpayer dollars. You can clearly see this approach in action if you just look at the refugee resettlement programs. Now, communists might also claim that they have the open borders position, but that's centered around the fact that they don't believe in private property in the first place. They're in support of syndicalism and the communal ownership of land, so nobody actually owns the land anywhere. And this is why they shout no border. So it doesn't matter if it's a government border or your property border, they think that they have the right to cross it ultimately. And if you ask others that claim to have the same position as well, you're gonna get a different answer. So when you break it down functionally, it means different things to different people. I never refer to my position as the open borders position, and I support complete and immediate privatization as a libertarian. Now that that's out the way, let's talk about some of the main talking points going on right now with the recent outrage, and that's the separation of kids from their parents. You probably have heard all of the sob stories and the pearl clutching by now. Let me say this, just because kids are separated from their children doesn't mean that something is inherently wrong. As an example, if you rob somebody and you get detained for it because you were caught, you are separated from your family. Free society or non-free, the mere separation of a child does not mean that there's automatically a wrongdoing. It's not a measure. Never will be a measure. But I do get it. What you're basically saying is that it's especially wrongful because the only thing that they did wrong was cross the line that's currently monopolized by the state. They didn't murder anybody or rob anybody. Now, this goes back to the fact that there are injustices being done on either side of this, and that sucks. But it's not simply because they were separated that makes this wrong in principle. It's more about who is doing the separation and why. But there's a whole hell of a lot of kids being separated from their parents due to illegal immigration. Some parents are sending their kids across the border either by themselves or with total strangers. That is the separation of a family. And you probably say, well, they're just trying to better their lives, trying to better the lives of their kids. That still doesn't negate the separation, especially when you consider how much they're in danger when they go on this journey. If we are talking about immigration from Mexico to the US, they not only face the threat of the border agents, but they face the violent threats of folks that will take advantage of them. We call this child endangerment anywhere else. Also, human trafficking is a thing. It's an actual thing. So you have kids that are being separated from their family in process of crossing the said border, and it is being done against the will of the kids and by non-border patrol agents. So this is the problem with the false dichotomies. No, not every person crossing the border is a violent criminal, but also not everybody is an innocent being or some uber smart entrepreneur or degree holder. And this is a problem with the monopolization because it's a one size fits all, and depending on where you align politically, you're going to try to make it seem as if the bulk of the detainees fall under a certain lifestyle. Democrats are doing this with the children. But the fact that a Democrat now cares about families is generally laughable when you consider the other policies they tend to adopt, which replaces the family with the state. Look at what the welfare state did to the black family. These idiots don't give a rat's ass about family. This just happens to be a new subject matter in which they can do their whole moral grandstand with. They'll find something new next week. Think about it. If Trump said, okay, we're just going to deport the whole entire family together, Democrats would not be pleased. Look, man, quite often these fools live in these areas in which they see hardly any sort of demographic change, and they just come out of their little protected communities. They cry their little crocodile tears, and after their speeches, after their reporting, they go back to their communities, sometimes predominantly white communities. And check this out. Because they remain silent, when you bring up Obama's deportation numbers, they'll say, well, that doesn't make it right either. Man, I guess when you're that suave and you're half black, you can get away with a whole lot. Look, guys, immigration is a lot more complex than many make it, and it shouldn't be offensive to bring this up. It's okay to not have all the answers or to have the solutions, but that doesn't mean that you should completely ignore the disadvantages or the advantages when it comes to immigration. Aside from principle, immigration at a mass level is not inherently good. See what's going on in Europe with their whole migrant crisis, and you can't deny the statistics. And when government facilitates this at a level, at such a mass level, it becomes mass forced integration, which can absolutely send some cultures into shock, creating violent beef over scarce resources, which is neither good for the migrants or the non-migrants. And the states are often creating this arbitrary incentive to migrate in the first place with their corruptions and regulations. This is what happens when criminal organizations like the state monopolize entire bodies of land. And to criticize some of my fellow libertarians who understand principle, bro, we get it. The state is illegitimate, therefore state border is bad. But you can sit on principle while also recognizing the gimmick. You're not the one leading the charge on immigration. We're not. Democrats are. You can say, well, get rid of the welfare state. Well, get rid of this, get rid of that. Don't punish the immigrants. But that doesn't change the fact that Democrats are the ones leading the charge, and they have zero intention on ending welfare. Hell, they're trying to increase it. They will gladly fund migration efforts with their funds because it helps their voter bloc. They aren't stupid at all. And according to Pew Research, first-generation Hispanics lean 63% Democrat compared to only 16% Republican, and second-generation lean 71% Democrat. They know exactly what they're doing. They get people to cling to the welfare statism here, and then they bring in others that also support the welfare statism. So you're fighting both the threat of welfare lovers here and the ones that are trying to get here. And it shouldn't be offensive to bring this up. This is the problem with the dichotomies. You can recognize the threat all while standing on principle and not supporting statism. But Democrats aren't trying to privatize the border. They will stomp out any effort to do so. You got to get a clue. Now, when people bring up the welfare state, I'm not worried about the same things many others are. You hear so often, you can't have open borders with a welfare state. Well, my thing is that if they're illegal, the hope is that they aren't eligible for any sort of benefits. That's a fantastic thing. They aren't feeding into the machine, nor are they getting the immediate noticeable benefits from it. However, the citizens are forced to still subsidize the state and don't get such luxury. The problem is the Democrats have no issue with paying for the welfare of said illegals, and at the very least they are supporting bringing them into citizenry at some point in which they will be part of the tax cattle. Liberty loses no matter what way you look at it. The discussion of immigration has been long off the rails, and I think it got off the rails once we started to try to move towards actual freedom. There's gripes on different sides of this, and some of these gripes are legitimate. There's a recognizing of the injustices being done to some innocent, quality people that want to migrate into the U.S. to better their lives. And there's also injustices being done to people that are already in the U.S. as a result of the mass immigration. And both of these injustices are caused by the state's monopolization of the border, as we wouldn't have this issue in the first place had that not been the case. And though we recognize this ideal setup, that is the abolition of welfareism and privatizing all the land and the state relinquishing its territorial monopoly, that sounds easy. But culturally, we're not even close to there. We're far away from it. We're not even taking the right steps in the direction. So it's not going to be clean cut. And that sucks. That does suck. But principles shouldn't blind us from the reality. The state is doing what it does. Plus, there's culture, there's demographics. These are actual things. Property rights, these are actual things. And you don't have to compromise principles to acknowledge this. Now, there are some very passionate people on different sides of this argument, and I'm admittedly not one of them. However, I have lived in Texas all but 1 year of my life, including South Texas. And I know a bit of something about when it comes to crossing the border, or the type of folks that are crossing the border. You know, so when you're dealing with this sort of migration, not everybody is some innocent family just trying to live and make a better life. Likewise, I know that not every person is a child smuggling murderer that plans to leech off the state. Also, centrism on this issue is not the moral high ground by any means. Now, some folks do try to dumb it down, and some pretend as if it's as easy as the border agents not doing anything and liberty would win. Wouldn't that be fantastic? Others pretend as if it's as easy as building a wall or something like that, but it's not. How we functionally get towards liberty and how immigration plays a role in that is uber complicated, and that's the problem, because people are too stubborn to admit that. It's far easier to sit on a sideline and pretend that humans are these robots as you sit on top of the mountaintop trying to convince yourself that a geographical area with 300+ million people, the vast majority of which completely reject libertarianism, migrant or not, as if they give a damn about you being principled. They don't care.